It's a city that's hosted all sorts of parties.
But it's never seen anything like this.
We're really excited, and we cannot wait to showcase Milwaukee to the world.
50,000 people are coming to town.
That's a great bump to the economy, obviously.
Those who aren't coming will be watching.
We have a chance to showcase Milwaukee.
History will be made.
We have an opportunity, all of us do, to help Milwaukee to shine.
And we're making sure you're ready.
This is Conventional Wisdom.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Conventional Wisdom, the only podcast with a guaranteed known shelf life of less than 4 months, as we get you ready for the Republican National Convention coming to Milwaukee in July. As we go along learning things, we're bringing you along with us. Ted Perry along with Stephanie Grady. And Steph, you picked the theme for today's episode. You call it Delegating Duties. Tell us why.
When you watch conventions on TV, other than the people speaking on stage, the real stars of the show are the delegates. But a lot of people, including Ted and I, have no idea what exactly their duties are when it comes to conventions, because we know especially their duties have changed as the years have gone on within our current political system. So we have 3 people who are going to be joining us today who can give us a ton of insight into all of this, from past conventions to what they're looking forward to with our current convention coming up in July.
We're going beyond the cutaways, where you see a cutaway of the Missouri delegation and they're all, holding show me signs. All right. Our guest, Paul Dame. Paul is a former Vermont state lawmaker and current chair of the Vermont GOP. Could you give us a wave, Paul, so we all know? There is Paul right there. Jim Walsh is a current Washington State Assembly member and the chair of the Washington GOP. He has been described as the hardest working man in Washington state politics. And Adolfo Tejas is the Republican Party chairman of El Paso County, Texas. Gentlemen, thank you. Before we get into the nitty-gritty and the civic duties that you all have as delegates, first impressions when you heard the convention was coming to Milwaukee. I say Milwaukee, and you think what? Jim, you're on first. What's your image of our city if you haven't been here before?
Breweries and a downtown core that's kind of interesting. I was actually there for the warm-up, the first presidential debate. Of course, the RNC always likes to do that, where they have a kind of dry run of the convention a year before, and that usually times in with the first presidential debate, the biggest field of candidates. And we went to the same the Fiserv Arena, the same venue where the convention will be, and got to watch the debate there. So it was great to see the facility. See the sort of how the lay of the land will be at the convention, and of course the debate was interesting, although the presumptive nominee was not part of that debate, but it was still a good sort of introduction to the place and what we can expect it to look like and feel like this coming summer.
So Jim, you were lucky enough to be with us for the hottest 4 days that we have seen in the state of Wisconsin, probably in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, it was warm. We have some warm summer days out here on the coast, but not that hot. But it was clear. That was good. It was fun to be there for a few days. It was good.
I guess now we have to bring in Adolfo, because he's probably saying, you want hot, come down to El Paso in August.
You guys got nothing.
Mr. Tejas, what do you think of when you think of Milwaukee? What's the first? You can't hurt our feelings. Just tell us what pops into your mind. Word association.
Well, first, I'm going to comment about hot. It's exactly what was going through my mind when I was listening to hot. Come down to El Paso. It's hot. The first thing that I thought about was sports, just sports. Plus, it's a city I've never been to. So that was exciting. I'm clearly going to try to be a delegate. I'm excited about going. What I know about it, it's a beautiful city, just never been there. So I am excited about going and participating in the convention for this next year, assuming I get elected to that. So I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. And Paul, last but not least, what about your take when it comes to our lovely Cream City?
I thought, there's a lot of similarities between Vermont and Wisconsin. We've got a healthy dairy rivalry there. But really, I thought that it was a really good place for Republicans to choose because it's a really important state here for the 2024 election. We could have the entire presidential race could come down to what happens in Wisconsin. And so I thought it was a great opportunity for Republicans to get on the ground, for us to make the case for why voters should be thinking about Republicans this election. And Wisconsin is going to play a critical role in 2024.
None of you have had your state conventions yet, so you don't know who will be representing your state at the convention. All three of you will be, I imagine, given your place in your respective parties. Break it down for us. Let's start with Texas. How do you elect your delegates, and is this a plum assignment? Do you have more people wanting to be delegates than there are slots available?
Our delegates are selected by each congressional district. And there is always, in the congressional district that I belong to, it's three delegates and three alternates, and they are elected by the voters from that particular area for the delegates that are at the state convention. Without a doubt, every position is a contested position, and there's always a vote. Like I said, I've been elected 2 other times. And there's some people that run for all 6 of those positions, never get elected, and people getting towards the end that have been running and not elected. You can see the frustration, you can see the disappointment, but it is people that are politicking, and they usually go to people that have been the most active and the strongest within the party for that particular district.
And I know your Texas convention is coming up at the end of May. Paul, I know your convention there in Vermont is the week before on May 18th. Are you excited for your state convention? How does that go for you, and how does it work in your state? Because we know when it comes to this sort of stuff, every state plays it different.
In Vermont, we're actually getting started right now. The delegates that go to our state convention are selected this month at town committee meetings. So I've got a training tonight where we talk to our town chairs from around the state. The Republican Party is built from the bottom up, so we're starting at that most local level that we have. So people will go to those meetings this month. That will give them a slot to vote at our state convention, and that's where we're going to select our delegates as well. In Vermont, we have a state convention. Anybody who's interested runs. We often have more people running for the delegate slots than we have the delegate slots because we're a small state. We're only going to elect 14 in addition to the 3 members who are automatic, which is me, my national committee man, and my national committee woman. So people are getting excited about it. It's usually the largest Republican gathering we have. Every 4 years, we'll have a couple hundred people, which for Vermont is a pretty good size.
Jim, how about you in Washington? Is this a coveted assignment, and will you have more people wanting to go than who can go?
Oh gosh, yeah. Already we've got probably 4 people announced and signed up for each of the slots we have to the national convention. Our state convention's coming right up. We're having it in about 2 weeks, and we've rolled it back earlier in the election year than it's ever been in order to get our statewide nominations and endorsements done early. And we have a really hot governor's race out here this year, with good prospects for a Republican to get elected in that for the first time in a long time. And so I think the focus of our state convention is going to be on some of our statewide electeds. We already had our presidential primary. We do that separate of the other nominating and endorsing processes. So that's already been done, and our state convention is coming up in a couple of weeks. We follow a similar pattern as the other states do. We start with local caucuses, and the delegate selection process begins there. And then we also sort of allocate our national delegates by congressional district plus some at-larges. We have 10 congressional districts out here, and then at-large delegates and alternates too. So the election in Spokane at our state convention will be hybrid, so partly by congressional district and then partly at large. There are slates that sometimes emerge, and most of the slates have to do with local issues. They aren't presidential slates as you might see in some election years. They have more to do with local candidates and local elections here in Washington.
The three of you have past experience being delegates, and the title of our episode today is Delegating Duties, because at least those who aren't inside baseball like you guys are when it comes to this sort of stuff, we're not exactly sure, other than seeing you holding up your signs and hooting and hollering when they come to your individual state on TV when we're airing part of the convention. We don't know exactly what your duties are and what role you play over the 4 days that you're going to be at the national convention. So, Adolfo, why don't we start with you? Because I know you've been part of 2 past conventions. And when you come to town, what is priority number 1?
Priority number 1 is always deciding who our president is. That clearly is the primarily reason for the convention. We from Texas wear white hats, and we from Texas wear the red and blue shirts with the white star on it, so everybody knows where we're from, and we make sure everybody knows. We're a pretty rowdy group, but it starts there. I can cover the other 2. There's 3 primary responsibilities that we have. The other one is to set the rules that we're going to deal with for the next year, and the last one is to vote on our party platform that we're gonna live with. So those are the 3 primary things that we're there for. But clearly, deciding on who our president is going to be is paramount. That's the issue.
And we're going to break those both down here as we go along. Well, Paul, I want to go to you because you are from Vermont, the one state that Nikki Haley won and then dropped out of the race. What happens to her delegates? But in the state of Washington and Texas, Donald Trump won handily. He gets those delegates. How about Vermont? Explain that process to us.
Yeah, so in Vermont, like every state, the RNC requires that on the first round of voting, delegates are bound based on the results of a presidential primary, if you have one, which Vermont did. So Nikki Haley will get, has 9 delegates. Trump has 8. So Trump did still get some delegates out of Vermont. It'll depend a little bit on sort of who ends up running and winning for these delegate positions in Vermont. As Jim was talking about before, in other states, sometimes the campaigns get involved and sort of have preferences. Sometimes they get to pick the delegates entirely. But in our state, we're mostly electing based on local issues, the people who have worked hardest for the party. And especially in this environment, I don't imagine very many people are going to be running as a Trump delegate or a Haley delegate. They're going to be running as somebody who's helped candidates win in Vermont, somebody who's been an all-star volunteer. Those are the kinds of people who end up getting elected as delegates. And in this race, the presidential preference is less of a factor.
When it comes to the actual convention, Paul, do the delegates ever switch sides? If certain delegates were for Haley, do they ever switch over to Trump? Like, how does that all work out and work itself out?
Yeah, there's some rules that if a candidate officially withdraws from the race, then their delegates can become unbound. So I don't know, we may not find out till July if that actually happens. It's one of those things. I don't know that I've seen it happen in the previous elections. So I would expect that the most likely case is that Vermont's votes are going to be just as they announced, just as they were based on the primary results. And Trump is going to have more than enough to win, as we've seen with the results we've had shortly after Super Tuesday.
And he picks up some more this week in Wisconsin, taking about 79% of the vote here. Jim, is there anything you want to add to that particular question before I go to the next one, which is about the platform? Is there even going to be a platform? And correct me if I'm wrong, but was there really any platform talk during your last Republican convention?
It's a great question. No, We've rolled forward some platform language we've used in the past. I think there's more interest, at least there is out here this cycle, in updating and really making a new tighter platform. There's a great interest, at least in our part of the country, for a platform that is both shorter, more concise, and also more direct in attacking key policy points that this country's grappling with. Of course, immigration policy has come to the top of many people's priority lists, and they want to see a platform that talks about protecting the nation's borders in a more direct and frank way, and kind of no beating around the bush, but let's talk about what we need to do. You're seeing similar things out here with law enforcement and crime, and you're seeing, of course, evergreen issues about the economy and interest rates and where things are for working families that are looking at buying a car or buying a house or all the things that people want to do. So I think there is going to be a little more discussion about how to make our platform tight and well focused on issues that really affect people's quality of life directly. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the Republican Party and for really common sense people, whatever your party is, to make a stand for what they believe in and the principles and the values that they think ought to inform what our politics and what our government does. So I think there's going to be more opportunity there than there's been to calibrate and sharpen our messaging.
There's going to be 2,429 delegates coming to the Republican National Convention. As you discuss a platform when you're here in town, am I imagining correctly that this is a giant conversation amongst the 2,000 people, or is this happening more or less in smaller back rooms, individual states? People bring talking points to the center, and then it's a small select group of people who are kind of making those final decisions. Talk us through how that works.
Anyone who wants, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So what happens is every state will elect 2 people from their state to serve on these different committees. The platform committee and the rules committee are kind of the biggest ones. And so the week before the convention, you'll have a smaller group. We have 50 states and 6 territories. So you'll have 112 delegates who will come to work on the platform in that smaller group. And then the platform sometimes has subcommittees within there, so people who maybe have specific concerns about the border or the economy may break off, and that group comes together, which is the size of a lot of state legislatures. Right? 112 people in Vermont, we've got 150 in our House. So you still have a sizable group that works on the platform that week before getting it ready. And they're in communication with the people back home. I'm sure usually the presidential campaign has a lot of influence in that process, making sure that the presidential candidate is in line with the platform and vice versa. So a lot of that work will get done the week before we get to Milwaukee. And at the convention, the larger group is basically going to be approving the work that happens the week before.
Mr. Taz, is there one committee that you, or one issue that you want to get on a certain committee to represent Texas? I imagine, obviously, the border is a big question there.
I guess a couple points here. Without a doubt, the border is very, very important. El Paso, if some of you have never been to El Paso, there's no big space between us and Juarez, Mexico. We're right there. Crossing is an issue that occurs every day, and the border. I can talk about this for the next hour and not repeat myself, because that clearly is critical. But as it relates, I want to touch base on one other item as it relates to our national convention. 4 years ago, I was on the credentials committee, and because there was some differences of opinion among how, and this is the way some of these committees work, there's differences of opinion as to who is the proper delegation to represent the location at the national convention. That required, because a lot of that convention was done by Zoom, but that required that all the individuals that were on the credentials committee, we had to go to Charlotte and we had a meeting. So that, I always like to say, I attended in person that convention, but it was for a very specific reason because of a difference that needed to be resolved. But as it relates to the platform, there's a host of things that are important from our perspective down here. And today, clearly, border issues are one of them.
I want to talk, this is a terrible pun, gentlemen, about the elephant in the room. Nikki Haley got 13% of the vote here in Wisconsin this week, even though she dropped out weeks ago. There is some division in the Republican Party about Donald Trump. In Vermont, Paul, you have a Republican governor, a very popular Republican governor, going out of his way to say, I'm not voting for Donald Trump and you shouldn't either. Do you see your roles as delegates when you get here to sort of be peacemakers within the party, to do a little retail politics one-on-one with other delegates to say, we got to have a united front or it's not going to go well?
Yeah, I think usually what happens with the national convention is the delegates who are going there to support the presidential candidate, the nominee that we have. So I would think that it's less likely that people who are big Haley supporters are probably not going to be running, not putting themselves forward as a potential delegate candidate. So there's sort of some self-selection that happens at the convention. So I wouldn't expect very much disagreement at the convention at all. And that hasn't always been the case. My first convention was in 2012, and there was certainly a little bit more hostility between the Mitt Romney and the Ron Paul faction there. I don't see a lot of that happening in this convention in 24, but it does raise a good point that there are a number of Republicans in states, certainly in my state, in some of these other states, who didn't prefer Donald Trump, and it's going to be really up to the Trump campaign to make inroads and try to work to win those people back. I think we've got a ways to go until we get to November. That's the nice thing about having the primary this early is we've got an opportunity to let time heal all wounds. And I think that as Republicans start to look and evaluate the issues that just Joe Biden has been created a lot of problems that we didn't have under a Trump presidency, I think you'll start to see a lot of Republicans come back, even if they preferred someone else in the primary. And that's part of what the convention is here for, to set forward a mission about. It's not just one person, one candidate, but what are Republicans doing? How are we coming together? And it's also kind of a campaign for all of the Republicans who are running for Senate this year, all of the Republicans who are running for Congress in the U.S. House. An opportunity for all the Republicans to come together during that week and say, we're on the same page. This is the direction we're going. America, are you with us?
Gentlemen, we have about 5 to 10 minutes left. This has been extremely insightful, and you've given us such a good grasp as to the role that you play within our political stratosphere. I have to ask, I believe that all three of you have past convention experience. I want to go one by one and ask, what's the wildest thing that you've experienced at past conventions? Is there anything that sticks out in your mind? Anything that's been contentious? Anything that's been wonderful? Just anything that has been a big takeaway for you and just a memory that's just, locked itself tight in your brain. Paul, we can start with you.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, as I mentioned, the 2012 convention. There was a lot of disagreements there, fights about credentials, about who were the appropriate delegates to come there. We had a group of people walk out from the floor feeling like they weren't recognized. So I think that sort of is a memory for me, because that was also my first convention. Since then, in 2016, which I guess I would have thought, given Donald Trump's position in the party at the time, he hadn't been a Republican that long. It could have been a more contentious convention, but it wasn't. And it's something I think I've seen even in the last year. Republicans are really starting to come together. We realize that the infighting that's happened has been to the country's detriment. And so I think this election and this convention has the opportunity to really bring people together.
Mr. Walsh, wildest thing you've seen?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Not crazy about some of the hats and other gear people wear.
How do you feel about Texas?
Not my cup of tea, exactly. The most important thing that I picked up is is again kind of messaging stuff. And the best messaging and the best way to bring people together is the simplest and strongest language in support of good policy. And again, we deal with this a lot in platform, but there are other places we deal with it. And the floor of the convention is a place to test the simplest and strongest ways to talk about values. And, not all of those attempts work, but you can see what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes the goofy hats are part of messaging, but more often it's the words people choose to describe their state, to describe their members. And you can see what really clicks quickly and what doesn't. It's a raucous kind of environment. It's not, there's not a lot of room for lengthy babbling. You have to say what you mean quick and make it impactful. And I think that's a good exercise for anybody. And I think it allows us to see what works and what doesn't work when we're talking to the great mass of voters and of citizens around the country.
Aldolfo, are you a fan of the hats?
Well, yeah, to get to that question, I was amazed at the size and the noise, the groupings of the delegates. It to me was just, I consider myself a small town country boy, and it was overwhelming. It was just a great, you have to stand there and just take it all in to appreciate how enormous that convention is. That was an enjoyable part. The other part, without a doubt, the Texas delegation I think stands out because of the white hats, and I was amazed at how much the press approached to discuss issues because they know that we're a big state. They also know that we don't always agree with each other, and we're pretty independent in this state, but we come together to support whoever our candidate is going to be. And a lot of the questions were, were you a supporter of Mr. Trump in the beginning? And answering those questions. So it's a combination of being able to deal with the emotion that you feel at the time because of the size and what's occurring, and then be able to be responsive and present in a positive manner whenever you get called upon to do it. I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish, and so when the Spanish news people realized that I was bilingual, the demand was big, and it was a good thing. I'm glad to be able to represent the Republican Party, but just the overall event to me was just an emotional affair. It was good.
Excuse my ignorance on this. Do delegates also have to sign off on the VP?
No.
Okay. Having said that, let's go quickly around the table before I ask my last question. Do you have a preference, either one of you? We'll start in Washington. If Mr. Trump came to you and said, who should I put on the ticket? Jim, would you give him advice?
Oh, gosh. Well, I could plug for a couple of our hometown people here. No, I mean, I think that Donald Trump is going to pick, he's already articulated a little bit what he wants to see in a vice president. And I think he, because he knows he's a polarizing figure, I think he's going to find someone who will be maybe a softening bit to his image and his outreach. I would expect to see someone who can outreach to non-traditional Republican voters as his vice president.
Paul?
Yeah, I think Trump's going to take all the time that he has. I think he's an entertainer. He loves the buildup. He loves the fact that this conversation's still happening. And once he dropped a name, it's a different conversation. Remember, in 2016, I didn't find out who his VP was until I arrived in Cleveland. So I think we may be a while until we hear. But I agree with what Jim said, and I think some of those things. Some of the things I heard from Jim make Tim Scott the kind of person that I think draws from maybe a different part of the party, who's been a supporter of Trump. So I think Trump feels like he'll have his back, and that's the kind of pick that I think has the opportunity to broaden the party and build some bridges.
Last but not least, Adolfo, do you think that it's going to be a surprise come convention time, or do you think that we're going to know well ahead of time? And do you have any feelings one way or the other?
I do not think it'll be well ahead of time. I think it will be a last minute and maybe again days before the convention, and that's it. But as it relates to giving advice, I think the comments made were very appropriate. I'm not sure I would give them any specific name because I think there's some good people out there. But I would talk about values, political beliefs, people's historical representation of that gives you a good picture of what they would be. And I might even say, which would offend him, that given his age, he needs somebody that can take his place if the need would come up. So I think it's more of identifying the right person with the right qualities, personality, and values.
I promise this is the last question. Take 30 seconds each, if you would. We pride ourselves here in Milwaukee on something, and the German-speaking people will get on me, Gemütlichkeit, a welcoming. We are a welcoming city. We like to throw a good party. We've never thrown one like this before. What do you ask the people of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County and southeastern Wisconsin? What are you asking of us as you come here?
My question, or my invitation would be, just keep an open mind. I know we're a big group. We're going to be a little disruptive with traffic and stuff like that. But you're going to get a chance to take the entire country and bring them to Milwaukee. So you'll get to meet people from Vermont and Washington and Texas and Rhode Island and Idaho. And it's an opportunity to find out what makes our country different from different parts of the country, and also what helps keep us the same. And I think there's an opportunity for people in Wisconsin and Milwaukee, as you get to meet Republicans from all over the place, to recognize that we got a lot of stuff in common. And it's something I think we desperately need in this country, to recognize how much we have in common and not spend too much time focused on what divides. That's the way we've got to move.
That's what makes us so great, right? As a country, we're all different, but yet so much the same in so many respects. Jim, we'll go to you. Pack your patience. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I just, let's have fun. I mean, that's what this is supposed to be. I mean, we're going to do some serious stuff. We're going to make a few serious decisions and a lot of small but important decisions about how we proceed in the political world for the few months after the convention. But let's keep it light. Let's keep it fun. I mean, as Adolfo and Paul both said, I mean, the upside of Donald Trump as the presidential nominee is the guy's an entertainer. He likes to have fun while he's doing it. I think that's going to be a great distinction between Republicans and the other guys through this year, is we're having fun at this, and I'm not sure the other guys are having much fun. They're having a lot of trouble and a lot of angst and a lot of worry and concern. I think we keep it light, we keep it fun, and we keep it positive.
Adolfo, what do you ask of us? As you own a restaurant, you know how to welcome people into your restaurant. What do you want from us?
Well, and I'm a social person. I'll put that right on the table, and that's all I ask for. I enjoy visiting with people. I enjoy talking to people from different locations, different ideas, different thoughts. And I would like to spend time doing that with not just the delegates, which I enjoy tremendously at these meetings, but getting outside. I will probably get there a few days early. I'll try to see your city a little bit, and I want to visit with the people. I want to get to know them, because that to me is what the world is all about. I used to work for a very large public accounting firm, and I traveled all over the world. And visiting different locations, it all has its own flavor, and I'm sure Milwaukee does, and I'm interested in it also. I'd like to visit with people when I'm there, and I think it will be an exciting event. I think it'll be a motivating meeting, and I agree with the comment from Jim about I don't think we're going to have the conflict and the problems that some of the other that whatever that other party's name is that they're going to have.
From the Pacific Northwest to the border states of Canada and Vermont, where you speak French up there, and from literally right next door to Mexico, we've got a nice triangle of delegates representing us. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to hosting you three and all your delegates in Milwaukee this summer.
Look forward to being there.
It'll be fun.
Wonderful. And you guys are coming at the perfect time of year, honestly. 50,000 people are expected. 2,429 of you guys will be here, and we're going to welcome you all with open arms. This has been Conventional Wisdom, Episode 2, Delegating Duties, and I think we all have a much clearer idea of what those duties are.
It's fascinating how each state is going to approach things a little bit differently. And one thing we did learn, everybody wants this gig. Every delegate, whether you're in Vermont or the state of Washington or the state of Texas, you want to be coming to Milwaukee in July. Next episode, you have lined up the mayor of Milwaukee, who many Republicans say was instrumental in landing this convention. Many said they were really wowed by his pitch to say, we don't care what your politics are necessarily. We want you to feel welcome and safe and appreciated here. We're going to talk a little bit about that.
We are. Mayor Cavalier Johnson, of course, a Democrat. He says that when it comes to this sort of thing, he sees green. And he says that this is going to put Milwaukee on a national and an international stage. And this is really just the beginning for our city. So we're excited to have him on next in 2 weeks from now, talking about kind of the economic impact and what's that going to be for Milwaukee, what businesses can expect, what residents can expect, the good, the bad, and the green.
The good, the bad, and the green. I love it. Well said there. That is on the next episode of Conventional Wisdom. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.